Clocking in at 62 hours, 400 Digimon found or acquired of 452 or 451. Our journey in Digimon has come to an end. So it's time for our little final game summary here of this game, which was fantastic. You don't put 60 plus hours into a game unless it's pretty fun. It's very, very good. Not perfect, I would say. Let's get into the negatives before we get into like the big wrap-up, which really cemented the game, because there are some negatives here. Particularly the way they handled the end of the game, which ain't too bad. You're going to get something like 50 odd hours in before you hit this like weird moment. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's a little unusual. And namely, it was how they handled the side questing. The side questing is pretty important. It gets you your anomaly points like in bigger quantities generally than the main story. And this is what allows you to essentially level up your Digimon and Digivolve them, right? And which is what everybody wants to do. It makes those requirements considerably less, which means that generally by the time you get towards endgame, all you have to do is swap personalities on them, which is very quick to do on the farm. And you'll be able to get nearly every Digimon you want rather efficiently, right? Certainly if you invest a bit more time than I did into this. The problem was they really wanted you to be able to jump through time in order to, at will, in order to complete a lot of the side quests, because there's many of them are story wrap-ups of what happened with various characters you met through the main story. So it'll be like a flower that you met in the forest area, or it'll be what's happening with Minerva trying to discover more humanity, things like that. So what they did is they decided sort of in the latter half of the main story to just stop giving you side quests. You get one that's to complete the arena, like the carnival arena, but that's impossible to finish at all until you finish the game. So it just lingers in your quest log, and then you don't get any. And I was quite surprised. Once you start pushing a bit of story, I was like, okay, generally in the first half, you'll do like a major story segment, and then it gives you like 2 or 3 side quests to bolster your team, and then you go back to the main story. Instead, in the latter half, they just stopped doing that, and you just generally got main story after main story after main story. And then when you get to that point where it goes, hey, you're about to finish the game, like you're about to finish the main story, you might want to consider doing everything else now. And then it just gives you about 13 side quests. It just bombards you with them, and it's like, whoa, okay, that's where they came from. Now, why is that a problem? First of all, they're not the best side quests. I would not say the side quests in general are the strength of the game in any way. They're very, very verbose. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of dialogue that is just written dialogue that it meanders a bit. Very similar to some other games we've seen in the past where they'll use, 3 or 4 paragraphs to get over a very simple point. And if it's not too bad when you're doing like 2 or 3, like you were doing earlier in the game. It's like, okay, I'm doing a couple of these. We can read through the story. Now, I am generally impatient. That's well known. So once we got through like 5 of these, I couldn't help but start like skipping through the dialogue because it wasn't gripping enough. It wasn't attention grabbing in any way. It was like, okay, I get it. We're going to go and rescue a beehive. All right, I don't need like 8 dialogue boxes to explain to me that there's a monster running loose and we need to go and sort it out. That's the situation. And so I started skipping a bit, and then I just felt bored. I was like, this is just really boring. And then it highlights another issue with this system in the way it's designed, is this really is just for completionists. Because by the time you get to this point, if you have been doing your side quests, pretty much you've got every relevant power-up from your talent tree that is worthwhile to you at that moment. And therefore, a lot of the points that are available for doing all these side quests are just to finish out everything. Even you might spend 100 points on a talent node that's for Digimon that you don't have and aren't going to have. Like, I ended up with my Digimon being Astute if they were casters, because that worked out best for me, and Brave if they were melee. And so everything else, which is what, there's 16 different talent personality traits, was kind of irrelevant because I wasn't using 14 of them. Because it didn't make sense for me to use them given the bonuses that I had. Because Astute and Brave gave you the biggest DPS bonuses, which is what I wanted. So I just moved them to there, and they became significantly stronger. It gave them like 20% more attack in the melee, for example. As someone in harder modes, for sure you're going to use more, because you might want defensives and things. But for me, it just made no sense. And so, not only is the journey not great through the side quests, but the reward isn't particularly worthwhile either. So I got a little tedious. I found it a little tedious. They then dropped off 3 collectathons, which were just, there's some Digimon around the city. Go and find them. There's some shades of one of the characters just around in different Digimon zones. Go and find them. Not doing that either. So that did cancel out the ability to fill out the Digidex entirely. So once that decision is made, I'm not going to do it. You know, that's the situation. I'm not going to be able to finish it anyway, so we're going to move forward. So I think this was the biggest bump the game had. What I think would have been a far superior system is simply just to spread these out a bit more. I think that would have been better. If like, even the collectathons, if the collectathon started sort of maybe 2/3 through the game, and you were naturally picking some up as you went, then maybe by the time you get to the end of it, there's only a couple left. Then I probably wouldn't mind finishing it. Some of the stories with, like, Minerva, you can totally do that before her ascendancy in the final chapter of the game, so just start that earlier on. Like, a lot of these could have been started earlier on, and therefore the wrap-up and conclusions were more towards the end, rather than the start, beginning, and end. Because most of them are quest chains, so you get 12 side quests, but a lot of them are like 4 or 5 quests each to get done. And so, yeah, I think that was the biggest stumble this game made. It was just a bit of a pacing issue, really. If they would have just spread that out a little bit more, and then the conclusions were at the end, I might have been more invested in it, but I wasn't by then. Let's talk about the actual end of the game, then. They made a choice, which some games do, which either is a risk, I think, and sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I think it did pay off. They tried to mix a number of things in. So the final chapter of the game is obviously the confrontation with Chrono Man. The big evil is now released, and we need to sort all that out. And we're uniting the Digimon because we've exposed the lies which created the Titans, etc., etc. So now they're going to unify. And what they decided to do was have you run through... They called it memories. They had an interesting time paradox situation where you were running through various glitched memories with Marukimon trying to like highlight where to go. But essentially, you've got to look for differences in the world. And then when you find that difference, which is just a door, it'll take you to the end where you get to have a little bit of a showdown. What they then had was basically a boss rush by going through a small section of every Digi area. So it's like a very small section of the Abyss area, a very small section of the Forest area. And within that, having quite a large boss battle. Some of them very, very hard. At least in the context of what I was doing. They like hard counted a lot of my units. At this point, it was reaching the final boss battle. And this is where they made the choice. It's like, you've just done a bunch of hard bosses. We're going to turn this into a big cinematic experience. So it's not really the big, mega hard final boss battle. In fact, the final boss battle is pretty easy because it's more of a cinematic, let the story play out. It's the uniting of all the major Digimon characters that you've met, all the leaders, helping you out. The boss de-evolves your entire team, which was really fun. I enjoyed this a lot. Despite the fact it wasn't difficult, it was fun. It was nice when I was like, oh my god, we got Digivolved, you know, having that surprise. And then slowly but surely the power regains as your team re-evolves back into who they are with wonderful, like, just over-the-top ridiculous set pieces of giant mechs and things blasting each other and laser cannons and all that kind of stuff going on at the same time. It was cool. It was cool. It's not a big, difficult, actual, like, gameplay thing. It's more of a big cinematic finale to the whole thing. And I'm fine with that. It doesn't, if you've had some good fight content all the way up to it, you can go ahead and have a big cinematic finish. I'm totally fine with it. As that wrapped up then, it was time to conclude this story of what's been going on. The main point that they made is that Agiamon, the goat boy, ascends to be the new... There must always be a warden of time, essentially. There must always be a Lich King. There must always be a king. And therefore, he ascends and is now going to be the manager of time for eternity. However, he's okay with it because he's going to watch over Inori. Which led to the question is like, she only doesn't have that long of a lifespan to go along with this. But that was fine. He like ascends to there and resets and refigures the timeline to be consistent, meaning that Inori no longer remembers him. But he did alter time in a way that her brother and mother were not killed in a car crash. So they're around. And you continue to exist as the only elements of Agiamon that still exists and remembers really what's happening. You go back to being this anime character this fictional anime character that you were based on in order to proceed around the world, and that's where the story will continue on. So there is a DLC coming for this game at some point. I think we'll check it out for sure. Then it led to some really cool stuff, because I talked about the, not a mega boss fight, but they had those there. There were super bosses, namely the Royal Guard. Now, a big part of the side quests that you get at just before the end of the game is actually recollecting the Royal Guard. I'm unsure of the lore behind this. Some of the guys tried to fill me in. These are not members of the Digi world. They're from the third place, which is the third representative of the Cabbage Patch Kids is actually another world, which is not part of this game, but the Royal Guard are from there, and they're like super mega strong. And they have now in the human world, and you have to go and find them and tell them to reconvene. The king has called them to assemble. So you go and visit them all and bring them together. It's like 12 of them, I think, 12 Royal Guard. And then you can fight them. Once you've done that, you can then fight them all individually. Very tough boss battles, particularly that they just disable some of the cheese in the game. Particularly Deadly Poison. This is possibly the most absurd spell in this entire game, and it's understandable why it's completely disabled for this super boss fight and then the extra super boss fight that comes after it. Because basically it does, I think it's something like 10% of their HP consistently, of their 10% max HP every time they take a turn. And most of the super bosses put triple turn on, so they can have 3 goes. So they essentially just kill themselves very quickly. It's very funny. It's very, very funny. And I had a good character called Baka who could who had like guaranteed deadly poison. Was not surprised to find this disabled for a lot of these boss fights, but some of them very, very challenging, like really pushed me to the limits of what I understood about the game and how to win. God bless that we got Miyu. I do not know the name of the Digimon that she is, but we'd created Miyu, and I'd invested a lot into Miyu, because even as a vaccine type, she could just tank and do enormous damage. We're talking like 14 to 16k crits by the end of it. I stacked her with like crit multipliers and tons of intellect, so she was able to, when she got countered, which happened on occasion, oh, my team was screwed. Like really badly. Really, really badly, which was fun. What follows that, though, once you defeat all the Royal Guard, you then get another side quest, which was fun, which was to do the ultimate showdown with Minerva. Minerva wants to fight you, and in doing so, you fight all of the Royal Guard and their evolutions in one continuous battle. This thing is brutal. Brutal. That it comes to a total of 14 Digimon that you have to defeat. Yeah, absolutely hell, because generally you are fighting a team that counters at least one of your Digimon hard with weakened states. This took a lot of reses, a lot of balance, a lot of careful turn order consideration in order to counteract what they were doing. In my first go at this, I actually got all the way to the 14th Digimon, the final boss, which is very hard, and he wiped my team like in 2 moves. And I had to do the whole thing again. The only thing I could do is I reassessed my team, looked at some modifications for gear, but noticed that some of them had like half the HP of what they should have by that point. So I did a quick farm visit just to not make them overpowered by boosting their stats particularly, but I just got their HP to where the rest of my team was. I had 3 members of the team who were about 9.6k HP, and then another 3 that were on like 4.3. They were massively underpowered and getting one shot all the time. But it turned out they were actually fine. They just didn't have enough health pool. Their defenses weren't that bad. They weren't great, but they weren't that bad. So once giving them HP and they could survive like a turn, right? Like could survive at attack. Then they were fine. And that was a great fight. That was really the end boss fight of this whole game. Ultimately, my conclusion is I give this a very, very high A, almost S. If it wasn't for that stumble at the end, it would be an easy S tier. But this is a very high A. A lot of people have asked me if it's worth the money. It's a $70 game. I would say if you are somebody who, if you're going to drop that money, you're aiming to get your most out of it, there's a lot more to do than what I did. I think I did not go into creating all the Digimon. Some of that reason was the branches are very confusing in Digimon for somebody who's not familiar with it. Opening the maps, which I checked out on the screen of the evolution lines, and obviously I don't know their names, which makes it very awkward to be like, okay, I need to de-evolve, say, Brachyman 3 times to then go on a different path in order to get this one. It would have just been a laborious task, which is why I didn't do it. But if you're looking to fill out that Digidex, and do everything required, especially completing all the side quests and maxing it out. I think for most people, this comes in about 75 hours to do that if you're somewhat familiar with the game. And then, of course, you have a hard mode and New Game Plus on top of that. So let's say it's about $10 an hour on average if you're looking to complete it. That's going to be a choice for you as to whether you're worth it. All I can tell you is you're going to have a fun time. If you're remotely into Pokemon or monster collectors, your Pal Worlds, things like that, you're going to have a really good time. The game is very, very good. And if you do hard mode, you're going to have to be pretty knowledgeable about what you're doing and get that engaging combat experience. For me, balanced was actually perfect. Very hard boss battles with not a lot to worry about while clearing trash throughout the game, and could speed through that without having to, build a team for this area, build a team for the other area, etc., etc., or have a team of maybe 9 or 10 Digimon on demand that I'm keeping up with. If you're somebody who's going to max all the characters out, that's also not that bad because you can do it at the farm. It just costs money. There is a DLC thing, which I'm not sure about. You can buy 3 dungeons. One of them gives experience, one of them gives money, and one of them gives something else. I'm not sure why that's a DLC because it's clearly something that's designed for post-game play. I haven't checked it out. I'm just making you aware there is a DLC which allows you to hyper boost a lot of stuff if you want to do it. So those are things to bear in mind. Our next adventure then actually is interesting. Jagex have been on the phone. I didn't know about this, but they've been in contact with us for a while because they had a sailing thing coming. And then in the back and forth they had with our business manager, Nupps, they found out we'd never touched RuneScape. I have never touched it in my entire life. I know nothing about it. So he set it up for us to do some RuneScape. I'm excited about this. I'm excited. I've had a lot of mixed feedback on people like, you're absolutely going to hate it. Other people like, you might find something really cool here. More than anything, I'm just curious about this like OG style of MMO, considering my history with MMOs. So that's going to be our next adventure. Will it last a day or 3? I don't know. Or longer. I have no idea. Maybe I'll hate it. Maybe I'll love it. Hard to say. We're going to go in blind and see how it goes. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with some RuneScape tomorrow. Bye, guys.